All right, this is my take on Shawshank Redemption. Shawshank Redemption is probably one of the best movies out there today. And that movie came out in 1994. Stars Tim Robbins and Morgan Freeman. and you could actually say that this movie also stars Shawshank. So the movie really was written originally by Stephen King as a novella. And if you don't know what a novella is basically a short/long story that is shorter than a novel. And that's what a novella was. And that was written again by Stephen King. And then later, Frank Darabont actually translated that novella into a movie, calling it Shawshank Redemption. And the novella was called Rita Hayworth and the Shawshank Redemption. So there's a little bit of a backstory there. So Frank Darabont made this movie and directed it, and he also directed The Green Mile. So this movie is fantastic on so many levels, not only because of the characters, and I believe this was nominated for 7 Academy Awards as well. The character arcs in this movie is actually unbelievable. Because we start off the movie, and I won't go through the whole thing, just give you a little snapshot. We have a banker that committed a double murdered his wife and his wife's lover, who was a golf pro, and gets sentenced to life ×2. We don't know in the movie whether or not, at least at the beginning, we don't know whether or not Andy Dufresne killed these 2 people. We don't know that. So gradually over the period of 20 years or so, you actually get to know Andy Dufresne and also some of the other characters, some of the other inmates, including Red. And Red is the guy that's known as the guy that can get anything. And that's how they get introduced to each other. Andy approaches Red and asks him to get him a pick hammer. And Red's suspicious and says to him, "Why, are you going to try and tunnel your way out of here with a pick hammer?" And Andy says, "You'll see what I mean when you get it, because it's not that simple." So Red gets the pick hammer for Andy, gives it to him as a gift for a couple of packs of smokes or something like that. And it's like a 6-inch rock hammer. And Andy uses that to keep busy, keep him out of trouble, and keep his mind occupied on some kind of a hobby. He used to be a rock geologist on the outside as a hobby. And now he does it as a hobby inside the prison. So anyway, when he first gets to the prison, he is harassed night and day by the sisters led by Bogues. And this guy is relentless. So there's sometimes where Andy actually gets away from the sisters and sometimes he doesn't. But he basically gets raped and violated for 2 years. Until one point happens where one break, where Andy is actually with a crew working on a rooftop, tarring a roof, and overhears some guards talking about their financial problems. Andy eavesdrops at the risk of his life because Hadley, the senior guard, had actually beaten a prisoner called Fat Ass on his first night in prison. So Hadley is not a guard that you mess with, and Andy was eavesdropping on him and basically said to him, "Do you trust your wife?" And Hadley was like, "This guy is going to take a flying leap off this building," stand back, grabs him, goes to throw him off the roof. And Andy says, "I can help you keep your $25,000 or $30,000, 100%. So the guard keeps him alive, doesn't throw him off the roof, and instead he ends up working for the warden. And because of that moment, the men actually get to have some beer on the rooftop, because that was the condition. Andy would help him with his finances, and then the guard would get them each 3 beers. So he does that. So that actually moves us to the next part where it actually helps take care of the sisters, because they're bugging Andy day and night. And one night, in the projection room, they actually beat Andy up within an inch of his life, which means Andy can't do the books anymore for the warden, which causes the warden problems. So the warden sends Hanley to deal with Boggs, and meets Boggs in his prison cell, takes off his hat, and proceeds to beat the living shit out of Boggs. So much that Boggs is basically paralyzed from the neck down and can only drink food out of a straw for the rest of his life in a minimum security prison. So that takes care of Boggs. Boom. Sisters leave Andy Dufresne alone for the rest of his prison term, and you don't hear from them again. Stories like that go on throughout the movie. But what's interesting is there's another pivotal turning point where Andy actually befriends a new inmate, and his name is Tommy, and he teaches him how to read and write, basically. And Tommy has a kid, so he wants to become a good father when he gets out of prison. I think he's only a few years away from getting out. And so Andy teaches him how to get his GED, takes his test, passes his test, and Andy's very happy. And then a little bit later, Tommy asks Red, what's Andy in for? And they said, well, for murdering his wife. And Tommy says, no way, not that guy. That guy, there's no way Andy would have done it. And they said, yeah, I guess he murdered his wife and a golf pro. And all of a sudden, Tommy's like, I can't believe it. So later that night, he talks to Red and Andy and says that he actually was in prison doing time with a guy that was just blabbing nonstop, talking about all the places that he broke into, all the people that he did, all that kind of stuff. And one of the people that he actually murdered was a woman, a banker's wife, and a golf pro. So the woman was actually a banker's wife and a golf pro. So Tommy brings this news to Red and Andy brings the news to the warden and says, look, this guy has overheard this conversation. He can get me out of this prison. I'm innocent, all this kind of stuff. And the warden tells him basically to let it go. And Andy says, why are you being so obtuse? And that sets the warden off. He sends him into solitaire for like 90 days, which is unheard of back then. Nobody went for that long. Solitary confinement. The warden approaches Tommy and says to Tommy, can you swear on the Bible, the Holy Bible, that what you heard was the truth? So help you God. Would you be willing to swear and testify in the court? Tommy says, absolutely, 100%. The warden says to Tommy, I was afraid you're going to say that. Walks off, gives a nod to Hadley, one of the guards, and Hadley takes him out with a sniper rifle, kills Tommy. And that changes and that turns Andy's life around in a way that it sets a whole chain of events, because now Andy's like, you know what? Either you get busy living or you get busy dying. So everybody thought that that meant that he was going to commit suicide. In fact, Andy actually asked for a 6-foot-long rope and went into his cell that night. Next morning, everybody gets out for roll call, and Andy Dufresne's, nobody comes out of the prison. So Red and everyone else fears the worst. They think he actually committed suicide. Warden checks with the guards, and they find out that the cell is empty, and the guard is freaking out, grabs a chess piece, throws it at, I think it was a Marilyn Monroe poster, and you can hear it banging inside a tunnel behind the poster. They rip the poster away, and it reveals that Andy had actually escaped from prison and crawled through shit and sludge for like 200-300 meters or 5 football fields through the tunnel, and got out on the other side and escaped, which was crazy. They sent out guards and everything to go chase him and all that, but he got away. So that is the whole Shawshank Redemption in a nutshell. Fantastic movie. If you haven't seen it, you got to see it. I've watched it I don't know how many times, but it's phenomenal. Every character means something. Every character is important. And this movie has one of the greatest payoffs at the end. If you've seen this movie, feel free to leave a comment behind. Let me know what your thoughts are. Do a video yourself, a video review of what you thought about the movie. I would love to hear your take on it. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel as well. And I look forward to reading some of your comments. And again, thanks for watching this YouTube channel.